To Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo, Dr. Shirley and medium Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world. This is Both Sides Now.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Both Sides Now. I'm Dr. Shirley.
And I am John Williams, filling in for Kelly today.
Kelly didn't get a haircut, so don't get confused.
Right? No.
Kelly is in Cancun with James Von Prague, and she texted me this morning and said, please tell everyone we're swimming with the dolphins, and her and James are swimming with the dolphins. She was going to send us pictures. I know, that's so sweet. Oh, I wish I was there with her. But I'm glad I'm here with you.
I am happy to be here with you, too.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make everything work because, I'm going to be in Communication Central again.
I know, I know. John's going to be taking care of everything, and I can't because I'm technologically challenged. So there you have it.
So we're broadcasting from the LA Talk Radio website today and also from the Facebook page. So we are live on that page, and we're going to be sharing that to our page right now. So that's what I'm doing. So we can continue.
So from what I understand, maybe you can share, I don't know if you're more into who you are because you're spiritual like Kelly is.
Sure.
But I understand there's a new moon coming on, well, Mercury retrograde is showing up tomorrow.
Right.
And I was just telling John, I signed a contract today, and I told my attorney and everyone, we have to get it in today because tomorrow is Mercury retrograde and I can't sign it tomorrow.
Right.
And he looked at me like I had two heads, but I said, I don't care.
See, it's catching on. It's catching on, which is a good thing.
I know.
And you got to do what's best for you, not what's best for everybody else, right?
Exactly. So you know me. My attitude is I don't give a fuck. So yeah.
Yeah.
So and then Wednesday I think is the new moon. So everybody is supposed to put out all their intentions on Wednesday evening, from what I understand. Do you know anything about that, John?
Yes, definitely. You want to put out what it is that you want to manifest, and you also want to charge your crystals, all that good stuff.
Oh.
Yeah. So
see, I did not know
put
that.
them out. Yeah, with the moon for sure.
Okay.
And so March is going to be a really powerful month, actually. So, I know I'm kind of like, how do we do this?
You want to put them in the middle so we can...
Yeah. So March is going to be a very powerful month in terms of getting everything moving forward. And so I know things have been like sluggish in the first, let's say January, February time. Mm-hmm. But March, the light is going to come shining because we got the spring equinox coming up on the 21st. So that's going to be pretty powerful to manifest what it is that you want to bring into your life. So
lovely.
Yes. So make sure that you stay focused on what it is that you feel have not manifested in, say, December, January, February timeframe, because really the new year is going to begin right around the 20th of March, I would say. And Kelly's been saying this for a while, too.
Yeah, so, she has. She has. And it's also my birthday.
Oh,
so
wow.
There we go, on the 10th.
On the 10th, okay.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. So today, we're going to talk about bullying. And it's a tough subject, but a very necessary subject because it's very real, and it causes, when kids are bullied, it causes damaging effects that really, really affects people. And you know that firsthand, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and as an adult, it's not that easy to say, oh, they were just kids and I'm an adult now, because it really hits hard.
Yeah.
The social interaction, even from an evolutionary standpoint, feeling socially connected with your peers, and particularly it's really big in high school, that developmental stage. Mm-hmm. And if, many people are bullied in high school as well, can have huge detrimental effects. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your experience?
Sure. It's definitely an involved one because, growing up gay, you know, and dealing with all of the challenges of what that means in life. So that in itself was very challenging, and also because I was a singer. So, having a very high voice at the time, and so, and singing a lot with Michael Jackson and different things like that, and Whitney Houston and people, so that brought me a lot of attention for my voice, but also for bullying because I sound like a girl, so I went through that, and that was a gift, so that shut me down in many ways because of, people were saying I was gay, all this stuff, which I wasn't ready to embrace at that time, and especially being in church with all the religion, and mainly I was staying in the closet to protect, myself,
right,
but
right.
also my family and the whole thing of what they are going to endure if I came out as a gay man. But that
is one of the actual criticisms that I have, or one of the disagreements I have with organized religion.
Sure,
is that in my mind, I always was taught as a little kid, it's made to accept people and embrace people and love people, and it really kind of shows up as a way to isolate people and separate people. If you're not like me, then I'm going to push you out.
Yeah. So I would think the majority of gay folks, especially back when I grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, especially the 80s and the 90s, it was really tough. But now with the internet and everything, and more open-mindedness in most places, at least here in California, because I moved away at 18 to pursue a career here in California, and haven't really looked back other than healing the process,
the wound.
It
causes a huge wound. It's not, bullying isn't just a garden variety aggression. It really is. It's a deliberate and repeated attempt to cause harm to others of lesser power that you perceive as lesser power. So it's very deliberate, and it's not, bullies are not, they're not born, they're made. And it happens, between 0 and 5 is when the brain is forming. So whatever your environment looks like between those ages is kind of who you're going to become. And bullies usually are bullied at home, and so they feel powerless, and so then they go to school and try any attempt to feel powerful, and so they'll pick on the weakness. There's a psychological definition, or not definition, but explanation of it, where they compartmentalize and reject that part of them that feels weak, that is getting bullied at home, and they separate from that. They fragment that part of themselves that brings a lot of shame, and then project it onto someone at school, for example, that is, maybe a shy person or a weaker person, and so then they get on that person kind of as a way to punish that own little weak person inside of them.
Yeah, and in my case, I would say, too, those people who were probably harassing me were gay themselves or questioning their sexuality, and probably were acting out, because I tend to see that a lot in a lot of the stories I've read, about people who later apologize to someone who they bashed as being gay because they themselves were, and it took them a while to get to that point of accepting it.
And that's it. That's another example, I think, of how you compartmentalize part of who you are that brings you shame onto someone else, project it onto someone else, and then you attack that person.
Yeah.
Kind of in a way to indirectly attack yourself.
Yeah, I've always understood bullies to be like power vampires trying to steal something that they lack from the victim.
Yeah. I mean, many times it could be it could be a difficult upbringing that fosters low self-esteem, and so the only way to feel better about themselves, and they don't have communication skills, and so it's by feeling powerful.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, bullies get away with their behavior because people sometimes they don't fight back because they can't, or they fall under the life is too short and I'm just going to walk away. Not really walk away, but let them get away with it.
And then bystanders are like, that's not my battle. That's, and they don't want to get involved. But we really need to have that, people stepping up and speaking out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so important. It's so important because it really has lifelong effects. And so it's not something that's easy. Oh, they'll get over it when they get older. And studies do show that when that you protect your tribe, people, they did a study because they couldn't understand the Nazi soldiers who would go home, who did atrocities, and then would go home and be kind to their own kids and kind to their pets, and they couldn't understand such a huge dichotomy.
Yeah.
And what it was is because, pardon my French, but asshole Hitler made them believe that the Jewish people were very different than theirs. And so when you see someone is very different than yours, you're tempted to protect your tribe, and if you have it in you, to do horrible things to people that you see as different than yourselves. It's that difference piece.
Sure.
So, and from an evolutionary standpoint,
Yeah.
you know, you had to protect your tribe. Otherwise, if they died, you were left alone, and then you were going to die. And so it's kind of an innate evolutionary instinct that we have when we see people who are very different than us. And that's why it's so important to teach kids at a very young age that everyone is okay. Differences are welcomed and accepted. I remember with Sydney, I used to play the game of life.
Yeah,
you know, that
I love
where
that
you
game.
then you have to get
Yeah.
married, and so sometimes I would be a boy and I would marry a boy, you know, because it would make you get married at some point,
Sure.
or a girl and marry a girl. And Sydney at the beginning would go, "Mom, what are you doing?" And I said, "You know, some boys like boys, some girls like girls, and some boys like girls, and you know, whatever floats your boat."
Yes.
So she accepted it, and then we played with her little friend. And I did it on
Okay,
purpose to
yeah.
open minds
Yeah.
subtly.
That was a
So
great teaching moment.
Sydney's friend said, "Your mom,
Is
she
lesbian?"
married a girl." And so Sid, in the most matter-of-fact way, goes, "Yeah, sometimes she's gay."
Oh, wow. I love it.
You know, but in those little examples,
Yeah.
you know, to show, to just open mind.
Sure.
To have an open mind and see differences, not as differences
Right.
that we need to protect ourselves from or be weary of, to embrace.
Sure. As you always say, curiosity.
Exactly. To be curious about differences and not feel that we need to walk away from them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to give out the phone number for people who
Yes,
are interested
please,
in
please,
calling.
please.
And so it's the phone number is 818-570-5085. Again, 818-570-5085. We'll be watching for your calls. I've got a lot going on here, but I'll do my best to watch for your calls and your comments. So we're commenting as well on Facebook, so we're watching you there.
yeah, please do anything that you have a question about, or if you were unfortunately bullied and want to share your story, or if you realize you were a bully and you want to share that side of your story and maybe, you know, apologize. There is an interesting thing that I was reading online is that you know, there is the power of suggestion. So in many cases, people tend to become what society perceives them as. And so because people ask a lot of questions, how do you change a bully? You know, it's very hard to change because a lot of times they get reinforced because they get what they want.
Right.
You know, like if I'm bullying, the little kid's bullying someone else for their lunch money or something, and they
That happened to me.
get it, right? Really? Aw.
Yeah.
So you can show, you know, so when a person gets kind of perceived as a bully, they will dig their heels in. And so, and I'm going to read it because I want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
If society perceives you as a bully, you're more likely to become more like that person and dig in your heels further. While it's important to show our kids that this behavior is completely unacceptable, it's also important to offer them the opportunity for a clean slate, the chance to redeem themselves. If an aggressive child shows that he can be treated with respect without having to push for it, he may be more inclined to alter his behavior.
I love that.
You know, so not completely, you know, punish them for being the bully. Certainly let them know that it's not okay, but then teach them how they can get their needs met in a different way.
Right.
And that might help kind of start to switch the bullying behavior.
You know, we posted on your Instagram, Dr. Shirley and Pellizzari, Instagram. Why do people
so
bully?
Go ahead and like it or follow it or whatever.
And you know, so I'm just going to share this with you. And so it says, why do people bully? To pretend they are tough, to try to get others to like them, to hide their own fears. They copy others who bully, so, you know, the copycats. They're unhappy and they don't like who they are. And so then we went to the comments, and we got a lot of comments about this. So people were reinforcing a lot of what was said there, you know, that they're unhappy, so they bring others down to their level by any means. Mark says people raised in non-nurturing households never develop healthy self-esteem.
Exactly.
And they so
It's
live...
very true.
And so they're disempowered and they're worthless or worth more and grandiose, and they think that's a factor.
Yeah.
They have low self-esteem and want to make themselves seem better. So we're seeing a constant pattern here with people saying that it's low self-esteem, insecurity, sad cycle, you know, identifying with the aggressor for their own from their own childhood.
Right.
Better than being the victim.
That's another reason why people become bullies, is they identify with the aggressor to hold on to that attachment connection. You know, certainly, obviously, if the aggressor is a parent, and so then you become a bully to be more like your parent and hold on to that attachment. So that's certainly another reason why people bully.
And then when you talk about cyberbullying, my God, that's a whole other thing. That's one where you can't escape because it follows you everywhere, on your phone, on your computer. You know, it's creating a community where all of this can happen. I mean,
and unfortunately, it makes it easier for people to bully because the person that they're bullying is somewhat anonymous, and it makes it easier to be mean to people who are not in your face if you have a teeny bit of remorse.
Or they themselves are anonymous, the person who is doing the bullying. You know, they create fake accounts and so forth.
Exactly.
And they don't take responsibility for their words. And I think that's why YouTube instituted a policy where it needed to be real names at one point, you know, or page names, so that there was responsibility for what was coming out of your, you know.
So the important thing for people who are, you know, the recipient of a bully, whether it's cyberbullying or not, which is not easy, and we've talked before, you know, in shows before about setting boundaries. It's important to set a boundary, even in cyberspace. And I know it's hard not to look at someone's Facebook or not to open that message or but, you know, channel me, the left brain, and don't.
Yes.
You know, for me, it's fairly easy not to. Curiosity doesn't take over because I don't want to look at someone I really don't want to see the answer to. Or I'd never ask a question I really don't want the answer to. I just don't. And again, when I'm running on emotions, it's much harder to do that.
And we got our first call.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Hi, you're on with Shirley and John. This is Both Sides Now. Can we have your name, please? Please go ahead and lower your volume on your listening device and listen through your telephone, because otherwise we're getting some feedback coming through. Yeah, so listen through your telephone. Just for folks who are calling in, please lower your volume on Facebook or your phone, and then just call in through your telephone and be connected directly to the studio. Hi, you're on the air. Can we have your name, please, and where you're calling from?
Hi, John. It's B, and I'm calling from Los Angeles.
Hey, Hi, B. Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much. And I know this issue very deeply and very personally. And it is so wonderful that John is here today because he was a witness to the unreal cyberbullying I went through and such a great support throughout the whole thing. So if I may, before I share my experience, I'd love to share how I met John, as it is so magical.
Yes, please.
Like your partner, Dr. Shirley Kelly White, I'm also a psychic. And I work with my spirit guide, Merlin. And in 2003, I got the hit to go to the Coffee Bean in Malibu and do 3-minute readings for free. So I did that every weekend for a month, and then one day I said, look, Merlin, where you are, you don't have to pay rent, but I do, and I need somebody to help me market and promote my gifts.
So true.
And 1 hour later, my phone rang, and it was John, and he literally said, I came across your website by accident, and I love psychics, and I love to help them market and promote their gifts.
Just out of the blue like that? You didn't know her at all.
Did not know her.
An hour ago.
No, I was on a blog and I was looking up stuff, and then I was like, oh, she's very interesting. I'm going to give her a call. Yeah.
Okay, see, that kind of shit blows my mind.
That's
it
synchronicity.
Really does.
Well,
yeah.
And even more amazing, Dr. Shirley, is that John immediately asked me if I heard of this psychic line that I said, no, I haven't. And he put me on it right there on the spot. And when I went to the site, it said the first 3 minutes are free.
Oh, my God.
She was practicing all those. Yeah.
The universe was preparing me to be on this site, and I was on it for 2 years. And after 2 years, I was about to become #1 in our category. And the psychic that held that, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to focus on that, but it's the ugly green monster that sometimes causes cyberbullying.
Yes.
And the person that held that spot just lost his mind, someone who I considered a dear friend. And he got me kicked off within 2 weeks.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Now, what I want to focus on, Dr. Shirley and John, is how the darkest times often lead to the greatest light.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, I was cyberbullied by this person and for a year. And as we all know, everything online is there forever. Then in 2012, I fostered 2 dogs for a woman who turned out to be an animal rescue fraud, and raised thousands of dollars on a fundraising site called Chippin for animals she didn't even have. And when I found out about it, I exposed her on Facebook. And then this woman saw the original cyberbullying, and she took it to a whole other level. She contacted my former psychic friend, and he told her the most personal things about me, which she twisted into all kinds of lies and exaggerations.
Oh, my.
She created profiles of me and sent nasty messages to people pretending to be me. She created sex ads on Craigslist and gave out my phone number.
Wow.
It was the most debilitating and humiliating thing I've ever been through in my life.
Oh,
And
that's
John
terrible.
was right there with me, weren't you, John?
And this went on for how long, B?
Oh, well, she went on for at least a year, and I'm saying to my spirit guide, you know, what kind of a spirit guide are you?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you let these kinds of things happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
And he just said, because you're strong, Dee, because you're strong.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm not that strong, and I wanted to commit suicide. It was so bad. I even called 911 and said, I want to kill myself.
Wow.
And the cops were there in 5 minutes and took me on a 3-day involuntary hold at the loony bin. And when the doctor asked me, do you hear voices, I had to say, I get paid to hear voices.
She's just having a staff meeting. That's all. It's just, you know, that's what she does for a living.
Right.
So she's just having a staff meeting.
A
where
staff
she's hearing
meeting in her
voices.
mind.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
And then one day Merlin said to me, instead of defending yourself against lie after lie, why don't you just be yourself and share your truth?
And that's her name, B.
How am I going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And I got the hit, create a Facebook page called Goddess Central, and just put beautiful images and inspirational quotes. So I did, and from day one, I literally got up to 500 likes a day. I got 165,000 likes in the first 14 months.
Wow.
And within the first 6 months, 3 people from different parts of the world messaged me that they wanted to commit suicide, and then they found my page, and it made them stop.
Wow.
And I started to do, and I still do to this day, I've 3-minute readings all over the world. I've done over 11,000 free 3-minute readings. And so I call these cyberbullies my dark teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for the future, if anyone is hearing this message, if you are dealing with this kind of ridiculous cruelty, and it is cruelty beyond belief, especially from strangers or somebody you're trying to help, do not engage.
Yeah.
You cannot give them 1 ounce of your energy, because that's what they're looking for. These are lonely people who want attention so desperately, but they can't get it in any other way by, causing grief or chaos.
Yeah.
And that's where I made my mistake, is I kept trying to defend myself, and I was, while this woman had just fed the fire,
Yeah.
And then the former friend, and I told him he was going to be famous and be on television, and he is. And then, and it's sad, because if he had just waited, he would have been on television, and we'd still be friends, because I really cared about him. So in any case, this is, I'm so glad you're doing a segment on this, John, and John knows even worse things happened as a result of the online cyberbullying. If somebody would get mad at me, they would see that, and then they'd make up a whole other story. One guy had me arrested. Remember that, John?
Yeah.
He pretended he got mad because it was a ridiculous reason. He stepped in somebody else's, not my dog poo-poo.
Yeah.
And
but substantiated
and then
those lies as facts.
Because,
I was saying that they Googled you, and then they read all that stuff, and they said, well, here's proof, and which wasn't proof. It was a bunch of lies that were made up by other people.
This guy actually went to court, but the judge, when she heard my response, she said, did you even read this? And he said, no. He didn't even read the response. I mean, he went to that extent to literally make a citizen's arrest. He pretended that he came at me with a video camera, and then I was like, just my hand going, stop, leave me alone. And then he scratched himself and said that I did it.
Oh, my goodness.
That's how crazy some people are. And then he used this stuff online to me. I never ever even met his wife. But he said that I would stand out the window and yell at her and stuff, which, everything was completely false.
Wow.
And it's sad to me that people like that exist, and will go to those lengths just because of stepping on dog poop.
But your spirit
that
guide
wasn't even my dog.
Yeah.
And he knew it. He said, I know it wasn't you, it was the kids next door.
But
and then what got him mad was that I said to the neighbor, the mother of the child who didn't pick up after her dog, Mark's a little strange. I saw him painting a picture of a dog taking a dump in his garage. And he heard that, and that to him was, he just, and I said, well, I'm sorry, but that is kind of weird, don't you think?
Yeah.
And that's what started this whole escalade of cruelty. And again, you just have to be strong, because that's the only thing. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And if you go through this, don't engage these people. Just stay away from them.
So you mentioned that your spirit guide said that you were going through this because of your strength, and this helped you become even stronger, as you just mentioned, right? So God Essential went on to help people to save their lives? Is that what you were saying earlier?
Well, 3 people, like I even say to the people, on the phone, if I hadn't been through all that cyberbullying, I never would have created God Essential.
Right.
And I wouldn't be on the phone with you today helping you. And, I've helped people deal with suicides. And, one woman, her daughter was murdered. She liked my page. I posted I was doing 3-minute readings. She called, and her daughter had been murdered just a few months before. And I was able to completely change her perspective on it, because I said to her, well, I'm getting the guy was caught right after he killed her. And she said, yes. And I'm getting that he was going to kill a lot more girls. And the mother said, yes. He even told the police that. And then I got this vision of this beautiful, angelic warrior woman. And I said, I have to tell you something, that this is going to be hard for you to wrap your head around. But your daughter was an angel on this earth, and the only reason she incarnated was to stop this guy, and that's why he was caught right after he killed her. And the reason she guided you to me is because she doesn't want you to grieve to see her as a victim, when she was in fact a warrior angel of God. And she's in the spirit world was seeing what this man was doing, and showing signs of cruelty from a young age, and she could see where that energy was going. So she incarnated, she stopped him. And this was the clincher for her mother believing that her daughter guided her to me, was because I said, I'm going to send you a story called The White Butterfly. It's about a famous French singer who lost her young daughter to a disease. And when I sent it to her, she wrote me back, I was crying when I saw this, because I have a friend who's also a seer. And she keeps telling me that my daughter keeps showing her an image of a white butterfly.
Oh, my goodness.
And keeps talking about the white butterfly story and how much she loves the white butterfly story. And we didn't know what she was talking about. And then I got your note, and I sent it to my friend, and she said that's the same image of the same butterfly.
Wow, that's amazing.
So,
it's
I could never have done that for her if it was. So Spirit guides people to my page. And, and I'm able to help people in ways that I could never otherwise. So the cyberbullying is difficult, and it literally can bring me to tears when I think about it, like right now. But it did serve its purpose.
Well, I think you're bringing up so many interesting points. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. But it's to feel what it's bringing up, because it's there, and I think it deserves respect, whether it's sadness or anger. And then also to notice, as you're doing, is it got you to where you are now? And I've said this so many times in my practice, when someone comes in because of something just unbelievably, traumatic that's happened into their life, either because, somebody caused it. And I think to myself, and then I'll say it afterwards at the end, at some point we're going to send that person a thank you note, because if it weren't for that experience, you wouldn't have been able to heal old wounds and then become the person that you are. And so you can only kind of feel that after the fact, after you see how it changes your life to the positive, on the positive end. But it happens every single time. And you're absolutely right that it happens for a reason. But while you're going through it, it's so hard to see that. And I don't know that you're supposed to in that moment. I mean, if someone were to tell me that in the moment where I'm going through something so difficult, I probably want to slap them. I mean, that's not what I need to hear. What I need to hear in that moment is empathy and validation of how I'm feeling. And then later on we can see, what happens. But yeah, you're cyberbullying. I love what you're saying as far as to not engage. That is the most important thing, to not engage. I remember when the first time I did something on TV, which was, I think it was, 2008 or whatever it was, with this gal who had a reality show about workout. I was so naive. I remember it was 10 o'clock at night. I'm thinking, ooh, I'm going to Google myself and see what I see.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And up pop all this awful, awful stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember I jumped back and I said, oh, I never want to see that again. And I never Googled myself again. I don't need to see that information. I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
There isn't enough curiosity that pushes me to see
Right.
it. And even now when
Yeah.
I post things on my own personal post, because I can be very vocal on some things, and people will write, and I don't engage. I don't respond to people who write negative stuff. I just don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important thing to do.
It is.
And that's a very clear boundary in cyberspace.
Right.
And a clear boundary when you're face-to-face with
Yeah.
someone is to also not engage, to diffuse the situation,
Sure.
either by using neutral words or just walking away, just saying this is not okay and walk away, or hanging up the phone if it's someone on the phone.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of strength to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not easy,
No.
but it's important.
And kids, I'm sorry, I just wanted to interject, but my heart goes out to young people today
Yeah.
because when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And so many young people are committing suicide because of cyberbullying, and it's just so tragic.
It is.
And I want to share one case of a young boy that, thank goodness, his mother was, and I met her on this psychic line, and Nancy, her son, was going through a very challenging time. He was being cyberbullied. His grandfather, her father, passed away. And so I read for him, and I'm an astrologer as well. And the first thing I said to him was, you have a great chart for a lawyer. He goes, that's what I want to be. And I said, but I see more sports and entertainment. That's what I want to do. I said, well, you definitely should do that. And then I talked to him about what he was going through. And you guys mentioned this earlier. I said to him, you know, your light shines so bright.
Yeah.
And that's the reason that some people are blinded by it and they want to put it out. But don't you let them. I said, you're going to be out of high school in no time, and all these kids are going to do nothing, and while you are going to achieve amazing things in your life. So don't even worry about it. And after that reading, both his parents, even though they were no longer together, they both said that he was like a different kid. And then, and this is the coolest part, which I love about being a psychic, is I said to his mother, I said, you know, Nancy, when I was reading for your son, I didn't want to say this to him because I didn't want to freak him out, but the entire time I kept seeing John F. Kennedy in my mind's eye. And she said to me, B, my father was a police officer in New York in the 60s, and whenever JFK would come to New York, he would ask for my father by name to be his bodyguard.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I said, well, guess who your dad's hanging out with, and guess who's watching over your son? And her son, in the end, changed his mind and decided to go into political science when he got older.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, that stuff just that's not random or coincidental.
No, synchronicities.
You know? Yeah,
right.
completely.
And John knows better than anybody because he's known me since 2003.
Yeah.
That I am the queen. He calls me the queen of synchronicities.
Yeah,
right,
for
Johnny?
Sure, I do.
That is so funny. But thank you so much for sharing your story and for calling. You're going to get an extra.
As well, I appreciate it.
You're going to get an added like today because after the show, I'm going to go to your page and like it if I don't already.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank you, B.
so much.
Thanks so much for calling.
John.
Thank you.
And I'll be sharing this on my page.
We appreciate that.
Good. Thank you so much.
So thank you again.
Thank
much love
you.
to both of you.
Thank you. You too. I wanted to also share along the lines with what B was saying. You know, to switch it around, I read on Twitter 2 examples. Sarah Silverman was being bullied by a guy, and she actually came back at him, and I don't remember the exact story, but came back at him with.
Yeah. B, can you disconnect, sweetheart? Because for some reason we can't disconnect the phone. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's not hearing it.
Yeah. I think he's trying to disconnect the
Okay.
call. Yeah.
So I was saying that Sarah Silverman was being bullied,
Yeah.
and she turned it around and showed kindness to him. And so was Patton Oswalt. That's another person who was being bullied or something negative. And he turned it around and found out that this man who was bullying him didn't have any money and was homeless, I think, if I'm remembering the story correctly. And Patton Oswalt actually started a GoFund page for this man to help him out. And this man completely turned around And so we can do that. We can show kindness by example, especially in the cyberbullying space, just because we can do that at a larger scale.
Right.
And maybe, open up these people's hearts, because again, they're not born this way. It's because of environment and circumstances and traumatic events that they become who they become. And we can't change everyone, and that shouldn't be the goal.
Yeah.
But to show kindness and role model kindness behavior can possibly switch someone's perspective.
Yeah, because they're looking for that attention, regardless if it's positive or negative, right? But they're acting out in a negative way in order to get that positive attention.
Yeah.
Or whatever attention they can get.
Right,
no matter.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a story about this based on my own experience, and it's something that I was taking a shower, and then all this stuff just came to me. I don't normally write, but I'll share with you what I wrote. I said,
please do.
I said, yes, I found that in my life that the adage hurt people is true. However, it's a choice for those victims to become abusers, to perpetuate or break the cycle, to speak out and seek therapy so that one can heal the unresolved trauma from childhood or that one has experienced later in life. I found that abusers are drawn to good, kind, and often very creative people. Those abusers view them as weak, but subconsciously, they know that there's something great within them. And they're jealous of that light within their victims. Somehow they know that you're meant to do good things to make a lasting impact on the world in a big way. And that they want to dull that light that you shine or leech off that energy until you're drained and they're done with you. They abuse you, they break you down, and if they see any signs of ever reclaiming your power, they become threatened. They hit harder, and they try to silence you and deceive people that you mutually know in an attempt to turn them against you. And they're thieves. They steal your joy. They rob you of a future of shining your light. They gaslight, and they make you feel that you're never good enough, that you're the crazy, paranoid one. They abuse, that you suffer from this experience, or many experiences from the unresolved trauma, often leads to isolation. It's very difficult to trust anyone, especially new people who enter your life, because you question their motives. Right. And the abuse, makes it difficult to even write about something like this, even to share it like I am, because you're always worried about being judged or targeted or used and abused again.
Yeah.
And, I believe it's true that our perpetrators can be our greatest teachers, as B shared as well. But in the meantime, a wound cuts deep, and it hurts, and it often really hurts.
Yeah.
And while it does heal over time, there's often a scar left to remind you how it got there in the first place.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. That is really beautiful and so, so true.
And I think that encompasses the experience of bullying on a regular basis and what it does to you even as an adult.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. The wounds are there, and it's so important to seek help to heal them.
Yeah.
They don't just heal on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it could be, will always be a memory in your history book, but it doesn't have to be something that continues to affect you. Yeah.
So ways of healing that when someone's going through it, what would you say? How would you feel what would be helpful? Because, from the spiritual point of view, you could say, let's advance to the future you and have the future you speak to the current you and let you know that you're going to make it through this and that you're going to do great things. And, but when you're going through it, what do you give? Because it's about loving oneself, right? Through the pain, loving oneself through the turmoil and but eventually if someone keeps repeating this stuff over and over again, does your mind go into this where it starts believing these lies?
Well, it might, and hopefully, you can kind of shift to, the perspective of being an observer and realize. But you said something a moment ago about self-compassion. I think that's the first step, is to really validate that this did happen and that it was very, very hurtful. It's sometimes so hard to have compassion for yourself, and if that's difficult to do, if the rational mind is going, yeah, but it was no big deal, why can't I get over it, what's wrong with me, that kind of thing. Think about a kid that you love, whether it's a niece, a nephew, a friend's kid, and imagine they were being bullied in the exact same way. And would you think the same thing? Would you tell that little kid, you know what, get over it, it's no big deal? Most often than not, you wouldn't.
No.
And so that's a way to get in to feel compassion for your own inner child is through another child. If it's so blocked because of a survival mechanism that you can't get in there. So that's the first step. And then a technique in somatic experiencing, because we work with the primitive part of the brain that doesn't know the difference between real or imagined, is to imagine if you could do anything, anything at all, without getting in trouble or even hurting the other person if you don't want to do that, what would you do? And so as that little kid, what would you do? The first time I did this, I imagined the Incredible Hulk, because I grew up on that show, behind me and coming up and kicking the shit out of the person who was bullying me. And notice your body as you imagine whatever scenario it is. Maybe you kick them into outer space. Maybe some people have gone as far, and it's just a metaphor for how hurtful it was and the rage. Some people have, poked people's eyes out, imagining. Certainly this is not to go out there and do any of it, right? But imagine it and notice your body. And most of the time you will notice the body beginning to relax, and maybe tingling, and that's nervous system releasing that stuck fight or flight that you weren't able to do when you were bullied. If it's easier to imagine maybe the adult you with that little you, yelling at someone. Yelling is part of the fight response. Maybe your legs feel like running, so imagine that you're running out of there. That you have a protective person around you. So whatever comes to mind, there's no right or wrong. It could be sci-fi, it could be anything. Imagine what if you could have done anything in the most primitive way, what would you do? And take a moment to notice how your body is responding to that image. And that will start to help release the traumatic effect that it has.
So you could lose yourself in movies of fighting the bully, as well, like the imagery from different movies where people are fighting back?
You can, but many times when you're watching it, it won't have the same effect as if you imagine it.
So then what about music, like empowering themes, things like that? Because I know a lot of singers have been bullied and then look at them today and then they're singing about those experiences to empower people.
As long as in what I know, as long as while you're listening to that song, if it helps empower you and then you can imagine what you would do if the song helps, it's important to imagine it in your own mind.
Got it.
So if you're listening to a song that allows you to feel empowered, that's wonderful. Or if you're watching a show where you can kind of put yourself into the superhero thing, that's great. But in order to heal your particular trauma, it's important to imagine how you would have protected yourself if you could have.
Got it.
Even if it was with your parents, when we get, when someone's coming at us, whether it's with words or physically, the body immediately, the primitive part of the brain immediately goes into fight or flight. So that energy is there. And if you can't protect yourself like that, which most of the time when we're little we can't, it gets stuck. So that's what we're trying to help that energy release by completing. And some people say, I'd run away. Okay, imagine yourself running. So that would be a nice technique. I would really, if it's something very, very traumatic, which any kind of bullying is, but I would suggest that you work with a therapist, because many times the healing also comes in that relational piece with someone as your witness to the healing. I would certainly look for someone, a therapist with some kind of somatic training, so they're trained in how to work with the body to release the trauma. But that's how I would go about it, and having compassion for yourself and for that little kid that got bullied.
And there are support groups too for this as well. From what I understand.
I'm sure that there are. And use your support system. Absolutely. Your friends, your family members if they're supportive, support groups. As much as there is cyberbullying online, there's also, you can find a lot of support online too.
I was just looking through, like stopbullying.gov has a bunch of resources as well. I was watching a movie yesterday called Cyberbully, and that was a very powerful movie, and I would encourage folks to watch that. It's about 9 years old, but it's still prevalent today. And relevant today, I would say.
And notice what feels good to you, what feels calming or relaxing in your body when you're doing it, as a way to heal, a traumatic event. In this case, we're discussing bullying. And do more of that.
More self-care, more meditation, more connecting to let's say the inner child, the wounded you, and sending love to the wounded parts of you, because as Kelly had talked about, you've talked about, it's soul shattering, and it takes a lot of healing in order to put those pieces back together, in order to move forward and accomplish what it is that you set out to do. Because spiritually, you set out on a mission. You're here to accomplish great things. This is part of the puzzle. This is one of the pieces of that puzzle, and life is all this process of integration, right? Of taking all these experiences and finding ways to empower you, but then also to empower others based on your example, your testimony.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because what I love about working with Kelly and of course you is you guys have that spiritual side, and what's soul shattering on that realm. In this realm, when we talk about psychology, is those fragmented parts of yourself. Well, those, we can look at those as fragmented parts of the soul.
Sure.
And so when you heal that, you get to integrate all these parts, that have been fragmented, that we even talked about with the bully themselves, that fragment that weak part of themselves onto someone else, and that's who they attack.
And I read that trauma releases a lot of stress hormones even after trauma.
Oh, yeah.
So that you're constantly in a state of anxiety in many ways, unless you work on it. Yeah.
Absolutely. You're constantly in a state of anxiety. You don't trust the outside world, and so you're expecting people to be threatening or to be abusive. And you're really looking at the world at the present moment through the filters of the past.
Yeah.
And that can really cause you to miss out on a lot of wonderful moments in the present because you're looking at it from the filter of the past. But how can you not?
Yeah.
If we protect ourselves from things that don't feel good, and so that's what the brain is supposed to do.
Yeah, it's important to end the cycle, whichever way, by speaking out about it, getting in the middle and trying to stop something from happening, seeking your own inner healing.
I read a beautiful quote that says, that because bullies are angry.
Yeah.
They have a lot of unresolved anger, and it comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
If we can maybe start to see them, protect ourselves, of course, foremost and first of all, but also see them as, as people who have been victimized themselves.
Yeah.
And so it says, anger is sadness's bodyguard, which is just so true. If sadness is your go-to emotion, if anger is your go-to emotion, there might be some sadness underneath that feels too vulnerable to tap into.
It's often why also people reject people before they have a chance to be rejected themselves, right? It's a defense mechanism.
Exactly.
And anger manifests itself as that bodyguard, so some people won't approach that person, but deep inside that person could be a really wonderful, loving person that's just been very, very wounded.
Yeah.
So try to reach them in a way and relate your own experiences when trying to interact.
Yeah.
In order to get to that part there's that heart that's still there, but it's just shrouded with thorns and walls and caves. And you got to get in there and heal.
Yeah. Everybody has a heart. Everybody was born with only love.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why people became who they are. And again, it's not to allow the behavior to continue if it's bullying behavior, but it's to protect yourself and set a boundary, but also to understand it from that point of view, but not allow it to happen. That doesn't mean we allow it to happen because we know, they probably went through their own stuff. Well, they did, but it's still not okay to allow yourself to be bullied.
Right.
So thank you. The hour flew by.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, B, for calling in and sharing your story.
Yes, thank you so much. What was her website so we can...
It's Goddess Central. Goddess Central on
Facebook, right?
Yes.
So a few things. We have a wonderful guest next week. Yay. Kelly will be back, of course.
Yay.
And then we have Carrie Gonya, who is the most beautiful soul next to yours and Kelly's on the face of this earth. She does family constellation therapy. She'll explain what that is. Okay. She'll explain it. I'm not going to say anything.
What is that?
And she's just wonderful. She is just an amazing human being.
Great.
And so we have her on next week, and of course, what's our different pages and
exactly. So if you go to Facebook, and I know that you're watching us there on Facebook now, but in order to get reminders, that we're going live and all of that, we want you to click on. So there's the like button, which you've clicked, but then you go to following, and you want to click on following and then hit see first. and then that will give you a notification as soon as we go live.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, so people can tune in. So it's Both Sides Now TV on Instagram as well, and we're building the following on Instagram, and then your Instagram, Dr. Shirley Impellizzeri. And
Kelly's Instagram.
Yes, Spiritual Medium Kelly White.
Yeah, so
and then your book.
Building it up. Yes, my book with the silly title, but nonetheless, the information in it is fantastic.
Yeah.
So please check that out if you'd like to. It's Why Can't I Change? So dumb.
No, it's not.
But it's...
No, because I think a lot of people wonder that, like, what's wrong with me? And they try everything trying to change, and they just don't know why they can't. So I think that's a book that would be draw people to them, you know.
Well, it's a book that lets you know, gives you the answer why, and lets you know that there really isn't anything wrong with you, and then share some tools for healing. But it really explains things, which really helped me, which is why I wrote it.
Yeah.
But anyways, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next week.
All right, take care, everybody. All right.
You've been listening to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo Dr. Shirley and Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world.